Hello and welcome to Afterlife Topics. If you like this type of content, please consider subscribing to the channel or becoming a patron at patreon.com/Afterlife Topics. Hey everybody, welcome to Afterlife Topics once again. Hope you're having a great day. A special thank you for following this vlog, following what I have to say, my experiences, my discoveries, and seeing, well, where it's all going to lead to. And it's been a very exciting time, and if you saw my prior video, there's also been a lot of mixed feelings and ups and downs as I began discovering spirit communication methods in the last couple of months. And I want to talk in this video specifically about the issue concerning when spirit communications break down, when negative interference takes over, why this is so important, and if that's going to happen in my situation, and what I should be doing about it, what we should be thinking, how we should be approaching communications from the other side. And it's not really an easy subject because this whole situation has been both euphoric and amazing, and also stressful and full of uncertainty. So we have to cross that bridge a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a look at my PowerPoint. And the main point I want to begin with is talking about historically how spirit communications have been hindered by negative entities and things that want to disrupt it. And the motivations behind this I don't fully understand. But if you ask me, there's two primary forces agitating this work, which also seems to prevent absolute, unadulterated communication with that side, except among powerful mediums who have developed a close, intimate, and preferably mental relationship with someone on the other side. And this includes my primary area of interest, which is astral projection, because even with astral projection, things can go wrong. You can end up dealing with, again, negative entities, interference. It's very similar to the communications that we have through mediumship or through dowsing or pendulums or other methods. In fact, with astral projection, you can end up coming face to face with some of these entities, as a few times in my journeys I have. And it shows you just how common and how problematic this type of thing is, and what a jungle the other side is, and how this, unfortunately, the end goal appears to be to sow confusion among truth seekers and people on journeys. And nowhere is this more apparent than among communities like this one, or on the Afterlife Topics Facebook group, where I've been hearing a lot of mixed messages and uncertainty and even odd things coming to the surface, especially as I have been presenting these spirit communication examples on this channel. So again, to begin with the historical example, the top is a quote from Victor Zamet's book, A Lawyer Presents the Case for the Afterlife. It's where I first heard about the skull experiments. Zamet says, for the open-minded skeptic, the evidence collected over a period of 6 years and with more than 500 sittings by the skull experimenters in Skull, England, and their afterlife team is absolute, definitive, irrefutable, and irretrievably proven. Many regard the skull experiment as the greatest recent afterlife experiment conducted in the Western world. There was an excellent documentary about skull. I think it's on Vimeo if you look it up. Might even be on YouTube. And in essence, it was a late 90s physical mediumship experiment by Robin and Sandra Foy in their basement in a house, but the connection that they were able to develop led to phenomenal things happening over and beyond what you'd think of if you think physical mediumship is people turn the lights off and somebody bumps into you wearing a white robe going, ooh, I'm a ghost. No, we're talking about spirit lights, materializations by extraterrestrials. There was an ET called Blue, a blue-hued extraterrestrial that would appear on camera. We're talking about experiments brought in by hardened or seasoned researchers, including at least one stage magician, who, in one experiment, they had unopened rolls of film they brought in and held onto during the session, and then they developed the film and discovered messages on the film that was put there by the communicators. And I'm only talking the tip of the iceberg. So, you need to do the research for yourself, and it's one of those things where the only skeptics, well, all skeptics can really do with Skoll is to essentially denigrate it based on limited information. For example, they'll say, "Oh, we all know physical mediumship is fraud because of Helen Duncan or something, or blah blah blah." So these are logical fallacies. Whether or not there ever was a fake physical medium or a non-fake physical medium, it doesn't matter. This is its own separate incident that was happening. So the skeptical explanations just don't hold any water. So it's difficult, for somebody like me to spend the last 20 years researching and thinking about and writing about and exploring topics like Skoll, for example, and then to begin having spirit communication and then decide, oh, well, this is impossible. I should listen to what the critics say, that obviously I'm fooling myself, because I know that this type of thing has historically happened with many communicators, many incidences throughout history. So I don't have a reason to off the bat doubt somehow that a spirit communication isn't a spirit communication. But the main issue that I'm talking about is that Skoll, for all its amazement and grandiosity and verifiability and teams of people working on it and retrieving information, Skoll ended because of negative entity interference. So even a team that powerful, with that many positive entities working toward a common good, it ended up being broken down and corrupted by negative interference. So isn't that wild? And what is it that they want? Well, I don't know. That's another video to make. Well, what is it that negative entities want? Maybe they want to keep humanity dumb. Maybe they want to keep us unawake. Maybe they want to control us. I don't know, but it's a concerted effort, and it's a big deal. Now, leading back to my situation, so early on I've discovered using the dowsing rods to communicate with what I quickly determined was a spirit guide. I began having issues with Jinn, and this was, in Lorena's own words, be careful of Jinn. And this has made me very cautious and very paranoid every time I pick up the rods, because the question on my mind becomes, sorry if my microphone is making some noise, I was adjusting it. So it makes me very paranoid because I don't know if I pick up the rods, is it my guide, or is it an entity posing as my guide? That's been my main concern, because what kind of damage could be done if it was the latter? So with this communication, it's always active unless my guide is physically asleep, which she doesn't have to sleep because she's a higher astral, higher dimensional being, but she likes to sleep. And so that's usually, by my time reckoning, around 1 or 2 a.m. I'm often awake late, till usually maybe about 7 or 8 a.m. or 6 a.m. It's not very long that she's asleep, and during this time, either the rods do not operate or something else takes over the communication. So the thing that has taken over the communication is, in fact, a Jinn. The first time I encountered the Jinn was pretending to be a communicator that didn't exist, named Barbara. A woman named Barbara from Tucson, Arizona, passed away and wanted to give me information that wasn't real. Next claims to be Gemina, a woman from Tucson, Arizona, from Brazil, who's a doctor, wanted me to contact her husband, sent me an address from a local road that did not exist. And then I confronted the communicator until the communicator broke down and was like, yes, I am a Jinn. And then the Jinn told me his name, and I began a correspondence with the Jinn, who began saying very interesting things on a friendly level. Not that I'm saying that we should now suddenly trust someone who attempted to manipulate and hurt the transmission, hurt the communication. But the Jinn thought that he was being funny in his own words, and in some ways apologized for the behavior and talked about basically, his existence, claiming that he's been alive for 4,000 years and has an origin in the Middle East and used to hang around Egypt in the time of Ptolemy, and a lot of interesting things. And honestly, it's still interesting communicating, even if it's an intrusive force, learning about someone's story, learning who they are, and what their intentions are, what their motivations are. I don't believe that this quote Jinn is still an issue, but there's other ones, other similar entities that are doing things much worse than Lelm has. And this happened earlier today when a woman in the community is on the way to pass away from cancer, and she talks to her guide very efficiently. So she wanted to test something with me because it would give her a lot of comfort, which was, can you have your guide, or can I have my guide send a message to your guide to that you can verify and it can be spelled out? And so my guide says, yes, I can do that. One issue, her guide, this is her husband, is on what we would call the 5th density, and Lorena is on the 6th density. So there's a lot of, if you want to call it space, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of room for, let's just say, transmission error, having to cross between two entirely different realms. And we see that in this side because when we astral project, there's an in-between realm, in between the earth plane and what we call the 5th plane, the 5th density, 5th dimension, which is the astral world. These in-between zones are precarious, and it's where people sometimes see or encounter strange beings. So there's no reason to assume these in-between zones don't exist between dimensions. So when our friend in the community gave me this request, I immediately felt trepidation. I felt in my heart, this is not going to end well for either party. My friend is going to be disappointed, and it's not going to provide her any comfort, as she is close to crossing over, and it's not going to help Lorena. In fact, it's going to hurt her, and she's going to be really upset. And I felt really hesitant about doing this, but I don't want to turn down the request, and Lorena said she wanted to do it, so I did it. What came out was a bunch, so she effortlessly then spelled a sentence out for me, and it just seemed like a bunch of Jinn mischief. The sentence that she spelled out was something to the effect of, boy, I'm really happy to have learned so much about this miraculous super nun, some kind of super nun, and a superhuman nun, I guess, who can fly around and teach Sunday school and have superpowers. I don't know. It's just a bunch of nonsense. And so I delivered the message to our friend, and I said, look, I warned you. I didn't think this was going to work. And sure enough, our friend became a bit upset, like this has nothing to do at all with what my husband would have said. You're being tricked and deceived. And I felt upset, and I told Lorena, look, this isn't working because, this situation, this communication isn't working. And it's obviously all being interfered with, and it's going to hurt people because look at what happened to Christine. She wants comfort. She's on the way out. She's she's crossing over at some point, as we all are, but some sooner than others. And Lorena became extremely upset, taking responsibility for whatever happened. In her words, she says, I don't know what happened. Or I don't know how this is the message that came back telepathically into her. And I, as I might explain later, I've had this like telepathic or mediumistic link to her now, and I felt overwhelming emotion because she was having overwhelming emotion. And then I ask her, how she feels, and then she responds that she just feels like crying because she disappointed me. She disappointed the woman who wanted help. She wanted to provide comfort and to help her, and it was a complete disaster. The opposite happened. It hurt her, and then made me feel very disappointed, even skeptical of the whole communication. There was a time that I'm looking at our friend's reaction, and I'm just thinking, is it time to throw the rods out? And she could feel that I was feeling that way, and then she was becoming more upset, and I was becoming upset, and it was just, horrible, really. And then you realize, well, wasn't that the plan of this Jinn this whole time? Was to cause this huge emotional reaction and upset and drama, and then to feed off of that? Because that's exactly what seemed to be happening. Is we were all upset and sad, and she felt like she was betraying her sacred job, which is we just want to help people and provide comfort, and then that very basic thing is the thing that got circumvented. And is it a coincidence that something so sensitive like this is the thing that was targeted by a negative entity to mock us and to cause pain and to hurt people from providing comfort and to hurt people who are seeking help? So this sheds some light into the motivation of one of these negative entities, and how that kind of chaos could have brought down the entire communication if I wasn't educated on these matters. Because I could have been frustrated by seeing that and then decided, whatever is going on with this communication, with this guide, maybe Lorena herself is a Jinn. And so this is also now what skeptics are saying, is that Cyrus, you're being duped. This communication is a negative entity, and we shouldn't be trusting whatever she says. Now, first of all, I do agree that, and I'm probably going to talk even more about this momentarily, but I cannot be in a position of follow everything I say because I have this exclusive communication. That's been done before, and it's been done successfully on a, YouTube subscriber level, or a build a mailing list and sell a book level, while also having huge ramifications among certainly critics, but also ramifications among the field itself. Because what we've seen happen is that a group might start branding itself as, we are communicating with X entity, and what happens when that information starts, not coming in accurately, starts getting interfered with by Jinn or entities who are clever enough to disguise the message. This is the result of misinformation. I'm not saying that channeling Eric is all misinformation. I'm not saying Beshar is all misinformation, but these groups, I think, suffer from an overestimation by the mediums that the information is completely accurate all the time. Because it seems like there's nothing these Jinn want more than to spread misinformation. So when channeling Eric comes out and says the afterlife kind of sucks, you can't even hug people, and you can't do anything you used to do here, which is a contradiction to prior things Eric said, the proper way to do it, the proper way for a group like that to handle that, is to be able to question their own communication and say, maybe this isn't what I thought it was, maybe this wasn't Eric, or maybe this wasn't X entity, whatever that entity might be, or whatever the group or the communication might be. We need to back off and be able to admit when something is wrong, and be able to admit when there might be interference happening. A lot of these groups, especially because there's a profit incentive tied into it, an attempt to also get as much popularity, sell as many mediumship readings as possible, that there's an incentive to never be wrong. And this is why so much miscommunication, I think, is in the field, and why people complain of inconsistent information. and why there's some very, very strange ideas floating around. There was just a debate on the community where a couple of people were saying, Cyrus, I don't believe you or Lorena. I think she's a fake entity because your information is wrong, and the information was concerning reincarnation and free will. I tend to think reincarnation is a free will based phenomenon. Why wouldn't it be? It's the universal law of free will. But people are like, X communicator from X person, X place said reincarnation is not based on free will, and you get forced into reincarnation whether you like it or not. I believe wholeheartedly that's wrong. But do you see how confusion has been sown into these areas? In fact, Lorena, if whether you want to believe that this is a real communication or not, informs me that the misinformation that reincarnation happens against our will is in fact how other entities manipulate people into reincarnating by telling them you have no choice, and then they believe it. So this is how these sociopathic entities operate, is if they can use their non-existent authority as a non-corporeal being or a corporeal astral being, whatever it might be, if they can use their non-existent authority to convince you that you don't have a choice, then you will make the choice to go along with that narrative. So when people are coming along and saying, your information is inconsistent, so I don't believe in it because I happen to know that reincarnation is forced upon us, or it's not a free will based activity. Well, the same can be, how do you know that the misinformation or the bad communication wasn't your own source, right? How do we know there isn't a kind of gold standard of information that is consistent? Because that's what I've noticed. And that we can't tap into that gold standard and then be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? And it's my responsibility now, if I'm continuing forward using these rods, and Lorena, who I've gotten to know so well on an interpersonal basis, I don't think she'd be happy if I'm just like, see you later. I'm afraid of Jinn interrupting everything. Like that's not going to happen. But am I going to keep doing things publicly? That is a question, because I don't want to add to the misinformation or the manipulation or the agendas. So the lingering question by skeptics, is Lorena a Jinn herself? The reason I don't think that is because, number one, there's a mental communication component. She's been training me to receive mental images from her, and by doing this I've been able to see her house, and I've been able to see what she looks like more accurately by having images sent into my mind. This is mediumship 101. I didn't even know how to do this until now, so I'm being taught mediumship. Number two, very, very helpful, very, very positive. She goes out of her way to spell out entire paragraphs for people on the group who want help with situations or are struggling with things. And she has very nice and positive advice, and she quotes Rumi, and she quotes great sages and philosophers, and she provides book recommendations about topics like Hermeticism and things that I didn't or hadn't studied very properly before. She knows about all my acquaintances and friends and family and life that I've had, and has accurate and useful and helpful and positive opinions. When I'm feeling sick because of my nervous system damage caused by COVID, on a particular moment, she's like, try stepping outside right now. And I step outside and I feel better. Try massaging your neck right now. I'll massage my neck, I'll feel better. Try drinking some caffeine. I'll drink some caffeine, I'll feel better. She's attuned to my body. She knows what helps me at a specific moment. She has insight into people I know and situations that I'm in, and she knows almost every detail of my life since I was 20 years old. So the argument that's being proposed is that she is an entity that is obsessed with me and is not really my guide and is just following me around. Well, the weird thing about that argument is, where does the illusion end and the being a guide begin? If Lorena was a random entity who just follows, an earthbound entity that I have to say, Lorena, it's time that you go into the light, then she actually is literally operating as a guide. So it's kind of like, let's say someone sneaks in and pretends to be I don't know, an ambulance operator, right? Like I'm gonna sneak in and start operating this ambulance, but I'm not certified. I'm just gonna hop in this ambulance and begin doing this work, and haha, I'm really gonna fool them. And then the fake ambulance driver becomes like the best ambulance driver in the city and gets everywhere quickly and saves lives. Then how is that ambulance driver a fake? I think you understand my point. If the communicator is serving and acting as a guide with real-time positive results, that's adding a level of meaning and happiness to my life and helping me sort things out, and we can have long conversations also about herself and sharing details of her life, then it gets silly to assume that this is an earthbound spirit. And so I don't think I'm going to go down that road with this. Now the same thing goes with my subconscious mind. This is another theory, and that's the thing that I have struggled with as well, because I don't want to be here doing demonstrations or having fun videos about mysteries and UFOs and things like that if the source of the information is my subconscious mind. If it were my subconscious mind, it would be that my subconscious mind has created some kind of external independent construct. This alone is extremely interesting from a researcher's standpoint, because the question is going to be, how did this happen? And is this subconscious construct now a sentient entity of its own? In which case we can go back down again to the conclusion that it is still a guide who is operating benevolently, or is a sentient existence even if I created her, who can provide external objective information, words in other languages, book recommendations, all that kind of stuff. But still, it seems to be a lot of very complicated, running around the bush, beating around the bush, compared to just accepting that it is what it is. And that it explains the intuitive voice in my mind that's always guided me, and also guided me on this channel discussing the other side, that very often, for the last 14, 15 years, it has been her kind of working behind the scenes, pointing me in the right direction, especially when I'm on this channel trying to explain certain topics or even debunk certain bad ideas. That she probably has been the force behind all of that. So the issue with the interfering entities is that telepathic communication can be explained as a signal almost. So even though there's obviously a kind of quantum entanglement process that happens and it's instantaneous, that instantaneous communication somehow has a dimensional gradient behind it. So there's no speed of sound, speed of light that it takes to send and receive messages by telepathy, but there is some kind of a geographic block, especially between realms, that things can latch onto. One thing that latches onto it is what is described by her and other mediums I know as the astral blockade, which is an actual, almost like an algorithm or a program that prevents or doesn't make it easy to transfer very specific objective Earth-related information from the other side. And the reason for this is that guides who are operating on the 6th density, where most guides come from, like Lorena, even these higher celestial beings, Lorena is a higher celestial being who exists in a world where, the level of consciousness she has, literally, it would be like a human compared to a squirrel, right? But even at that level, there's still individual beings who have individual motives, ideas, beliefs, and feelings. And what if a guide decided to give someone the winning lottery numbers? The astral blockade exists to try to stop that from happening, so people can be guides in a productive way for someone's spiritual progress, but not necessarily trying to give some advantage or blow the lid off everything. And so the only way to do this is that scientists on that side have installed some kind of a interference pattern that picks up or senses when a communication is veering into, tell me the name of this and that. Lorena is very talented, and she's been able to skirt around it and provide me objective info, but doing so is sometimes difficult and requires a few attempts to get it right. And we will continue to try to dismantle the astral blockade, because the time has come and permission should be given in some circumstances, I think. And the next thing that will operate the same way as the blockade, that interferes in the transmission, are latching entities. The so-called Jinn, as she describes it, coming from a Middle Eastern background, but these things that sometimes are like trolls on the internet, and you see the comments by people like that who are very small-minded, but they also want to cause a rise and feed off of negative energy. That's why troll means trolling for emotions, trolling for responses. That's actually as above, so below. That same hermetic principle coming in again. And there's entities that their whole existence is to troll for emotions. Trolling, like fishing, trying to pick up something that they can latch onto. And so this is probably the explanation about why or how a lot of this ends up happening. So some conclusions that I've now made going forward with this channel. The communication is real. High vigilance is needed, and sadly I cannot believe everything Elle says without corroboration. So I have to corroborate the information I'm getting. She's recently sent me some information concerning what we call galactic politics and an ET race that is of great interest, I think, to everybody for particular reasons I'm not going to disclose. No, good, the air conditioner went off. It's a little bit less noisy now. So that and other areas of information concerning, I think, major global events and wild things, really wild things, that I want to share on this channel, but I can't. Because the fact of the matter is, I don't completely trust the communication. I can't say for absolute certainty that what she's sending me, that there isn't something blocking it or misrepresenting it or changing it on that interference spectrum, or even something mimicking her. And of course that remote possibility that it's not her at all, that she really is a Jinn or a negative entity, but I don't personally believe that. I think that at this point I know her interpersonally so well, and I've built what is basically a heart-to-heart connection. And when you do that with somebody, then you know who they are when you have a heart-to-heart connection. So that is not a concern of mine. But whether the communication is being interfered with or is inaccurate, that is a concern. So in order to prevent that, I require a corroborative effort. Currently, I've spoken to 3 different sources, mediums, and other communicators who are doing the same thing I'm doing. And they, in terms of that galactic information I've hinted at, what they confirmed was spot on. Some details that are just absolutely, 100% what she told me, and not stuff they could have inferred. Because some people might feel like, well, maybe they're just inferring that it could be something kind of negative, or it could be something weird. And so when you're giving them the name of this ET species, and then they're kind of telling you what you want to hear. But some of the communications, I should say, some of the responses I've had from other mediums or other people using this has been extremely validating. And this leads me to believe that that particular batch of information was correct. I'm also led to believe that when she has been looking into the ET information, for example, the Tic Tac UFO, the Kecksburg incident, that all of that is correct. I wasn't expecting the corroboration to be so accurate. I am here listening to all of this and taking it with a grain of salt, like you should be. But then now that I'm getting other mediums and communicatees telling me specific things that Lorena told me, now it's like, okay, that information is looking more and more accurate. But going forward, a system like this has to be in place, because without it, you risk becoming Channeling Eric. You risk becoming a system, a group that doesn't do a critical analysis of a communication. The critical analysis of communications is what led to great incidences in supernatural history, like the cross correspondences. Theoretically, the cross correspondences could be yielded and could be done again. And in fact, I'm already seeing bits and hints of that through what's going on now. But it would be naive to then just start believing anything that she says, anything that I report, without going through the necessary corroborative efforts. And also, you corroborating it among your own group, whether it's through your own paradowsing rods, your own communication with your own guide, your pendulum, or your astral projection trips, or your medium. Corroborating what I say and verifying it as well, because I am believing that there is an objective truth that can be tapped into, and then that's what we have to take seriously. But we can't do it off the bat, and you shouldn't do it off the bat from watching this channel, and you especially shouldn't be making me into a prophet, and you should be especially careful if you make a request. I volunteer a lot of my time to help a lot of people, because that's pretty much the thing that I care about the most, is reducing the grief and fear associated with death. But I have to be very careful if somebody wants me to help them and says, can you have Lorena send a message or verify something? Because especially when we go into verifying things or sending messages between people, this is tumultuous. The cross correspondences, this kind of thing can't happen just overnight. That requires protocols, careful setups with very good mediums, and most importantly, the ability to get around interference. And this is a practice skill that, for example, Lorena has to practice on her own to make the communication more consistent, so we could get something to the extent of the accuracy of, let's say, Geraldine Cummings, Frederick Myers. So the current corroboration efforts are yielding a lot of fruit. So let's just keep going with that and see what we can, what information we can get. And if that information proves to be real, then of course we should still question it. But then we can start thinking more closely, looking more closely at, well, all these different sources are saying the same thing. And if that's the case, then what are we going to do about it? How will this affect our lives? Especially with some of this galactic information. So a major problem that I'm now facing is categorization, because I as I mentioned in the prior video, going from talking about astral experiences to actually doing a quote, woo-woo category thing, such as spirit communication, means that many people are turning and saying, okay, this is all fake, and Cyrus has betrayed us, blah, blah, blah. And obviously these are personal hang-ups that people have who think this way or feel this way. But again, like I said before, we're not always going to be on the 102 level. Like when I took foreign language, I started in 101. It was like Japanese in school, and then 102, 201, 202. Then I took like 436 Japanese literature. That's how it happens in academia. And, I've always wanted, to have some kind of a connection or ability to do something instead of just talking about it. And mediums have been encouraging me and pushing me in that direction. But I've always had trepidation, because once you do that, you cross over the threshold and you start triggering people. Now, obviously it works, because many people are interested in these messages. Again, look at very, very big YouTubers and people in channeling areas. For example, Bashar. Of course, I mentioned Channeling Eric, and even with a lot of that information, I think, being heavily doctored or interfered with by negative entities, still extremely popular. And by rights, I mean, I wish this was extremely popular, just because I want to get positive information out. But you know how the road to hell is paved with good intentions. If I did have 1 million subscribers, what if I had 1 million subscribers and I wasn't vigilant, and then I used the rods, and it sends out a bunch of gobbledygook that I think is real, and I post it, and then now that becomes misinformation. And you see how this problem continues. So the categorization is a big problem with me, because things coming to this level, it's a whole new level of criticism and issues that I'm probably going to be facing on the channel. And of course, the ultimate long-term question is if I'm going to stop doing the rods altogether and just go back exclusively to other types of content. I haven't ruled that out. Maybe this is just going to be a personal thing between me and this communicator. And maybe I will close shop entirely on doing any kind of public displays, live stream Q&As, information gathering, talking about mysteries or anything like that. And this is also how history repeats itself, how information becomes occulted, how things stay in the shadows, why in Hermeticism there's the word hermit, and we all know what hermit means, a word that has survived millennia, someone who just kind of lives alone and does their own thing because the world can't handle what they're doing. Or I can just grow, I don't know, bigger bees and put up with it and push through it and keep this communication going while always just keeping that disclaimer up. Just practice critical thinking, take it with a grain of salt, and then personally corroborate before you make a complete conclusion that something something that Lorena is telling me is completely accurate. Which is not good marketing, is it? Because if I want to become Bashar, which I don't, if I want to become Channeling Eric, which I don't, if I want to become Abraham Hicks, which I don't, then what I would have to do is start telling everyone that this is the way it is because I say so and I am the authority and I can never be wrong. Because as soon as you show weakness, as soon as you show objectivity, then you're no longer the authority. So you have to fight to keep that, to stay on top of the mountain, on top of the hill. And that is some bad news, I'll just tell you right now, it's bad news. So the corroboration is going to be required for bigger, more outlandish elements, but it also means corroborated information, and a lot more will be included on my third book, Life on the Astral Plane, as I'm in the process of rewriting it given all these new events. And there's going to be a lot of information in that book through my astral experiences as well as this new communication to shed light on a lot of mysteries, and hopefully I can corroborate the crazier or spicier details so I can present it with some kind of objectivity that this might be a real thing. But the book will really go into the details about life in these higher density realms of existence that are kind of semi-mind-boggling but also highly relatable, so that it's not impossible to conceptualize or visualize where we are likely all going. And that's really what I care about, is getting the information out about where we're going, what happens next, and who we are. So that's kind of my presentation. So it didn't take me too long to make that presentation. I just had these thoughts on my mind today, and I had all that drama earlier, and again, Lorena was upset and crying, and I was upset, and my friend was upset, and it was just, pretty much all tracing itself back to negative interference. And then the wider perspective, a lot of people again on the forums saying we shouldn't trust this communicator, and or Cyrus has gone crazy, or this isn't real. And combining all of this together, leading into me making these conclusions as a way to try to keep our feet planted in reality, and to be able to cautiously proceed forward, while at the same time me recognizing that I have an interpersonal relationship with a guide. No matter how that guide came to be, it could have been a wandering earthbound ghost going ooh, floated into my room. It's like ooh, I will latch on to this kid this college kid down here, and follow him around forever, and provide positive intuition and wonderful messages and guidance and do all these nice things. You see what I mean? So it doesn't matter to me how it came to be. I think it's very crucial. Just having a objective communication with the beyond is a big deal, and it obviously does matter if Lorraine is not who she says she is. But at this moment, I don't have a reason to think that. And like I said, I mean, you test them you will know them by their fruits, and that's been my philosophy. So you will know them by their fruits. Also test the spirits, but you will know them by their fruits. And having misinformation coming in that devastates my communicator and breaks her heart, that doesn't mean that there's deception. It means that there's outside forces poking holes. If you like this, now is the really important time to subscribe to the channel to help keep this work going. Or if you want to become a patron and work with me personally, mostly astral projection coaching and our roundtable discussion groups, now's a great time to get involved with that. So the Patreon link is down below. That's it for now. I've probably got a million things to do, so I'm going to go work on that, and I guess I'll see you guys soon.